You there? Oh yeah, yeah. Wondering how we got good sound. Yes. Also, you'll let me know when you're ready to start. Yeah.
Okay, I did a mic check. So,
Yeah. How is
thank you so
everything?
much for your time. I'm
It's
really looking
great,
forward to
mate.
it.
Yeah. Got a little summary. I guess we could think about what we might talk about today with the show. Uh, One would be epsilon and lambda waves. Most people might not have ever heard of those. And the reason is because they're so ultra slow. And the reason is yeah. Because they're so most people only thought, oh, gee, something must be happening at least within a second or something just like that. But these are things which happen well below a second, you see? And so, because of it, it's something which hasn't been noticed. In electrocardiograph, some of that starts to become noticed, or the wave itself, the type of wave that this is. But it cannot necessarily just come from a heartbeat per se, but the heart and your magnetocardiogram and things just like this are all sort of like fairly influenced a lot where wave function is. But you've got these ultra slow frequencies where somebody's really in uptime. Most like somebody is really good at healing. Very few people could be perhaps able to use their hand to help heal, this sort of thing. But somebody who's like this, they really do have this ultra low sort of frequency lambda and epsilon waves. Um, and you could learn a bit more about these things where our work is. But since we've got a bit of work, some ideas are sort of coming up for everyone. So we could sit back and tune in. We've got a really great show. So these waves we're talking about, they come along where you're in a state of suspended animation. You could be in a deep trance. You're very generally more receptive because you've got nothing extraneous going on, you see. So where this state is, it's a very flat, beautiful, horizontal sort of waveform, but it carries a very, very fast gamma wave along with it, you see. Okay. So these lambda waves, they can have very high hertz that they're carrying along like a piggyback along with them. It's very high frequency waves and often not uncommon 100 to 200 hertz sort of thing, piggybacking things there as well. You've got this beautiful capacity going on, and you've got various things that influence this, like physiology, which we'll come to talk a bit about. Yet its direct measurement of these, like we talked about, hasn't been so, available because people can have not even thought about these very low amplitude waves. So confusion kind of exists a bit because you've got epsilon wave referring to heart signal and cardiology, and you've got the same signals and things coming from where awareness and bliss is, where you're in eye awareness. You've got this beautiful permanent feeling of bliss. It's a pure being where living and speaking and what's going on where the moment is. You're living what you're speaking and you're speaking what you're living next, you see. I saw how incredible it is, of course, that you're following instruction just as anybody else is. And as you follow good instruction, wow, this is pretty good. So awareness really is a being. It's not a state. And it's beyond perception. And it's what is connecting you right now here to your omnipresent universal self. And so whole brain patterning and whole brain functioning, there's at least 53,000 hours of empirical investigation that's behind this, where neurology is and behavior and physiology. And it is the only place on the earth where you've got a body of knowledge which relates to integration. And what is the element of integration, which is the vestibular sense, which is distinguishing all of this work for many years from anything anything else, like anything in the field of neurolinguistics, for instance. So you to be able to have in whole brain functioning have an understanding of how you're using the vestibular sense. And so, you've got verbal, yes, you've got non-verbal also, language, and syntax is sort of structural sensory motor stuff. You've got morphological sort of phonetics as well, and phonology, which is sound, and you've got cognitive science, and how do these things all relate to you being more eye-aware and having more lambda and epsilon wave function in your life. So whole brain functioning, as you could learn a bit more about this coming up here, we're going to be talking about that. It's sort of really integrating your neurology, and it's really the science more of language and behavioural programming. And so you've got related concepts which in the field, some of it could relate a bit more closer to neurolinguistics itself, because it engages where this is. Though it's a much far deeper focus, because you've got this primary meta sense, which is the vestibular sense, which we're going to be learning a bit more about that. So life colloid, which is kind of small, double small building blocks, and they communicate good. You'd think, well, you've got something that doesn't. It's like, no, these things communicate. Okay. And communication is on another level beyond what people could have thought. And you've certainly got nerve, and you've got connective tissue, and you've got cavity space, resonance. But anyway, whole brain functioning is about verbal and non-verbal patterns that allow us to live more in the whole of ourselves. And it really is your capacity to be able to read internal nerve structure that's behind pleasure and aversion. And so you've really got this beautiful form of behaviour and development we're talking about, producing a keen sensitivity more to language, and you're summarising everything really by just saying that this is common sense, and it's also uncommon wisdom. Okay, so it's a path of least resistance, not most. And this is really the definition of communication. It's the response that you've got back. So as you could see, of course, the code where we are here could be put to machine language, enabling a quanta, more adjacent quanta in communication for smart contracts. And this is sort of the thing which is going on inside you. So the more you've got a dual efficiency quotient, the better. And you've got substances that really is physiological, which we'll talk a little bit about, like homocysteine, and that how does that spent amino acid basically not cleared up cause lipoprotein A to be very high levels and independent, a synergistic risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And so your cardiovascular function, vital, is something which could be throughout life, and how are you using your body so that you're beyond your mind, because then your heart's going to certainly do better, of course. So homocysteine is spent from the methionine excess, where that was, and homocysteine should be broken down because you need B vitamin, but otherwise, as you could see, this damaging blood vessel linings and triggering oxidative stress and things, and binding to protein and collagen and elastin and weakening tissue. So how you're going to be feeling where all that's going on, I think that light food and whole brain functioning is put together. So you've got lipoprotein A otherwise deposited to help protect the arteries from that sharp-sharpedness relative of the causticness. You could imagine these things causing the lining of the arteries and capillaries and things to become inflamed if you didn't have this lipoprotein A laid down to deposit there. And those plaques all form because of that. So if you've got high methionine, well, it's because dead food diet was meat and bean. Word like meat, it sort of like doesn't describe flesh, but it is flesh, isn't it? But then what do you call a fish Does that have meat? Or a chicken, does that have meat? People have learned the word me eat is more like maybe relating to uh, something which is in their culture, whatever that is. So, but flesh it is, everybody could see that, of course, and being, those are things which is really linked to inflammation, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about this. You've got endothelial cells which line the passageway and damaging things that go on. And nitric oxide opens everything up, but suddenly we've got impaired nitric oxide production. So the process of homocysteine disrupts protein function and activity. We're going to be talking a little bit about nitric oxide vascular dysfunction and dimethyl arginine, which inhibits nitric oxide synthesis, you see. So all of that would have lowered the levels of nitric oxide and the openness your blood vessels have to function properly. And how you're going to have this beautiful calm, which you can, and override where all that is, and you have a piece of this which becomes state specific, and nitric oxide is produced more. Where nitric oxide is or not, you've got vascular vitality or dysfunction, you see. So oxidative stress produces superoxides which react to and reduce nitric oxides. You've got endothelial dysfunction, reduced blood flow where that is, and epigenetic change where vascular brain tissue is all linked to dead food. So might be something you'd really be learning a bit more about live food instead. And also to reducing cortisol. Okay. So linking the thoracic outlets where a syndrome is, where arteriosclerosis is, you've got mycotoxin, all impacting your microcirculation. You've got mycotoxin, which is the excrement of non-ecological life fluid that kind of arisen because the terrain wasn't right. And so all those life colloids, they excrete into your body. And what that's called is called mycotoxin. So mycotoxin really is mold and damaging to the endothelial cell, start to oxidize and cause stress and inflammation and these sorts of things, which you can see in the blood. Why haven't you looked at the blood? Okay. So everything where that is, a lot of debris in the blood, contributes to Raynaud's syndrome. What's that? Spasms, triggering, or more everything where your hand is, where you put it into a cold water, where cold stress is. It's supposed to get nice and red, but it doesn't. No, it goes really white instead, you see. So dead food, flesh and being, leads to leaky gut, and you've got mycotoxin in the bloodstream, and that leads to a systematic sort of inflammation and things that you'd see in the blood. But you could see by just looking at the body as well, you could have learned how to do this, you see. So mycotoxin like FB1, and I'm not going to mention its tone many, linked, of course, to neurotoxicity and neurodegenerative diseases. So something be really interesting to me because I'm a neurobehavioral physiologist, and sort of like I'm just thinking about what's going on to the mitochondria you've got, and so how does this all impact your feelings of bliss where you are, and what is it that we're talking about is body things, and how are you over the top of that, because you bring in a bit of what this is, and so you're able to clear away everything else, you see, like cyanide, for instance, and things like that. You've got related toxin, which really requires you to be in a new mindset, and that new mindset assists to help you detoxify from, like you've got potassium rhodonase and things that helps with this. So cellular respiration and toxin, mitochondria, things like this really is targeting the toxin that's there in the mitochondria, like cyanide, and blocking the oxygen use, leaving the organ to have had a bit of damage going on. And so, opiate's not really an answer where that is. Your own internal sure is. Otherwise, the synthetics all suppress respiration, don't they? And they shut down nerve control where the breath is basic. So it's mechanisms that lead to sort of fatal respiratory depression and stress where cortisol is reduced and whole brain functioning training is, you've no longer got this chronic stress, high cortisol, anxiety, depression, irritability, and insomnia, and impaired immunity. You've got whole brain functioning training, which really is a repatterning of your aversive behaviours, and you're going to be seeing that you've reduced all your cortisol level. So it's really micromineral and orthophilic, which we'll learn what this is, like magnesium in the blue manner, and adaptogenic compound, and like things where you could have knowledge about, like reishi, for instance, and ashwagandha, and support for where stress resilience should be. You've got excitotoxins and glutamate, though, haven't you, where food is, and excessive glutamate, like where pea protein and powder is. All of that could have disrupted amygdala signaling and always caused sort of a bit of fear, conditioned, heightened sort of pain and fatigue and anxiety. And so, being in awareness, you're able to have something over the top of what that is and trigger something else instead. But otherwise, you've got this glutamate, you've got that heavy food protein linked to mood instability and impaired cognition. You've got xenoestrogens also from the mycotoxin and things, and hormonal disruption. Those xenoestrogens, and then you've got like a lot of plastics and things like the BPA, phthalates and parabens and zearalenone, all mimic estrogen and are disrupting of your hormone balance. So where someone is, where bliss is, you don't really have any hair loss or anything, but otherwise you've got lots of hair loss and libido and estrogen dominance from the stress and what have you, and you've got DNA damage and all sorts of neoplastic condition as a risk. So estrogen dominance really is worsened if somebody just hasn't thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't do all that dead food, all that processed fat, all those phytoestrogens, you know what I mean? All the soy and the flax and legumes and things, what people are eating. Dead food, somatostatin otherwise is released, isn't it? More in the digestion of a heavy meal of fat, protein and carbs, they're all triggering somatostatin release. It really would have slowed your digestion down. That's not right. And so then it would have also suppressed human growth hormone. Wow. So that's not good. So dead food meals cause like a snowstorm where the blood is, and you've got fat particles, chylomicrons circulating where blood vessels are, and you've certainly got life and nutrition where all of it otherwise is really supporting better, efficient digestion and very healthy, healthy processing where things are. And so you've got the mind, and your mind's the gut. Otherwise, you've got nitric oxide, which you should have, or no, you've got this sort of vascular dysfunction. So you've got this dimethylarginine, ADMA, and it's an asymmetric dimethylarginine, which inhibits nitric oxide synthesis, you see, where all that stress would have been. In other words, it just doesn't let you have nitrous oxide. Oh, wow, that's not too good. No, it isn't. And so, you've got ADMA, and that's this asymmetric dimethylarginine, and you could remember this a little just for a moment, and that's inhibiting nitrous oxide synthesis, and that lowers all those levels, and so it's a smooth muscle dilator, nitrous oxide, and opens all the blood vessels up, but otherwise, no, it's not. It's not opening up. So where stress is, because someone has patterns in the way they're doing things, and it's not whole brain function whatsoever. It's not the use of the vestibular system in a correct way at all. So that's going to lead to more oxidative stress, isn't it? And producing more superoxides and these sorts of things which react and reduce nitrous oxide. Ooh, nitrous oxide, you really need that because you need to have your blood vessels open, right? Yes, you do. It's like, and what happens when You're not framing things positively. You're not focused on moving towards things. You can get a stimulus sense this way and having things come in and have this be in balance versus no, it's not. So you could look at the building blocks and actually rearrange all of that. So you've got a result otherwise, the endothelial dysfunction. The endothelial cells are the cells that are lining the passageways of your body. Keep this in mind. And it's reducing blood flow where you don't have nitrous oxide. Otherwise, then, what have you got downstream of that? Epigenetic dysfunction, vascular and nerve tissue. Okay. So it's linked where anything is dead food and consumption of that, lacking of any enzyme whatsoever, or cooked and coagulated, congealed. Nobody's going to say that that's not linked to the thoracic outlet syndrome, and it's sort of all sorts of arteriosclerosis that goes on from stone in the tissue and stone in the arteries. And so mycotoxin and microcirculation all are linked. Mycotoxin wants to put all of it, get all of that, so it sort of goes to the very periphery of the cells, and that's where it doesn't let proper circulation happen, because it also clears away nitrous oxide. So it gets vascular spasmed instead. And so you've got endothelial cells which are oxidized where stress is an inflammation, and that all contributes to Raynaud's syndrome, and that's those spasms where cold stress is. You've got the flesh in the bean, all linking, and everything to systematic inflammation. You've got mycotoxins where things are. You've got cyanide where this is, and it's related to detoxification. Can you, where you've got all the cells in a depolarized state? No. Why? Well, because they need hydrogen, that sugar, to run properly. And do you have any glucagon, which is the hormone to raise blood sugar? Generally not, especially if you've had this complex carbs all cooked up big and tucked into heavy protein along with it and fat. It's going to cause somatostatin to be released and shut the stomach and pancreas down. And you're going to have any glucagon after that? No. Going to have any human growth hormone? No. So life food and whole brain functioning is ever more like related to how much bliss and things that you can feel, of course, and how cellular respiration of a toxin is in your mitochondria, and is its what's its capacity to be able to function versus, oh no, stuff's gone on there where oxygen would have been blocked. So opiates is not going to be the answer where that is it? Because it suppresses respiration, honest, and get an effect because of that. Oh, gee, it's not too good, honest. Shutting down central nervous system control where breath is. It's sort of a mechanism that's fatal. And so you've got stress where cortisol is being reduced. Whole brain functioning training, which you could have in learning, and you're reducing chronic stress. That doesn't then lead to high cortisol. Doesn't lead to anxiety, depression, irritability, and these things, you see. So where whole brain functioning training is, you really focus on more language and verbal and non-verbal patterns that allow you to live more in the whole of yourself. And so you've got a repatterning capacity, to be able to repattern aversion and repattern aversive behavior. And what are you going to do? Reduce cortisol levels. Gee, how good is that? If you've got lipids, you've got orthophilic micronutrients, like where the blue manna is. You've got all these formulas which are so extraordinary, like brain alterative, and you've got adaptogen types of other formula. And so a resilience where things are, where product is, because it could be focused on unique things, but we could talk about that. But you've got excitotoxin and glutamate in a lot of things, don't you? And how are you going to heal this up? The excess glutamate, especially pea protein powders, it really does disrupt amygdala signaling and this sort of thing. And you've got glutamate where heavy food is. And of course, this is linked to your impaired cognition xenoestrogens we're talking about, all hormonal disruptors, and the phthalates, and you've got effect of hair loss and low libido and estrogen dominance and DNA damage otherwise where dead food is, and also a lot of stress, because why? You don't have any whole brain function pattern going on. Why don't you learn about that? So it's beyond neurolinguistics. It really is. You've got physiological conditions where somebody is more in eye awareness, which that isn't about estrogen dominance. You see, it's the opposite. So all of it then, where stress would have been, somebody would have been not out of their mind, like what whole brain functioning is, and eye awareness, but in their mind and having made things worse, and then just tucking into a lot of dead food, processed fat, phytoestrogens. And so dead food is going to cause somatostatin more to be released, and you've got digestion not really going on properly. You've got probable heavy metal and all sorts of things, and fat, protein, and carbs all triggering that somatostatin release. And what does that do? Slows digestion. Stops the stomach from being able to empty itself. It's going to be made into triglycerides, fatty acids. And these things all release somatostatin, and it suppresses human growth hormone. So you're going to thrive after that? No. So dead food, it's going to cause a snowstorm in your blood, fat particles, chylomicron, all circulating in the blood, stressing the vascular system. Life with nutrition really avoids all of that. It's a very ancient digestive health type of a circulation more that you have. Otherwise, you've got this carbohydrate restriction, and this is going to cause mitochondria, also low glycogen status, and carbohydrate restriction really is going to lead to an altered glucose. And these sorts of things where uptake is for all of that sort of thing to the tissue, you see. So it really is how that carbohydrate restriction causes mitochondrial dysfunction and lower glycogen levels, where your status as far as this is concerned. And that carbohydrate restriction is going to lead you to have an altered glucose uptake in your tissue. Okay, just keep this in mind. So you've got increased fat oxidation, don't you? And all the stresses where mitochondria is accelerated oxidative damage. And is it that you can see how dead food consumption is linked to mitochondrial decline and reduced ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that's your energy molecule output, and leading you to not using but aging instead? The accumulation and the faulty mitochondrial contributedness to where neurodegenerative damage is overall and your cardiovascular metabolic diseases, drugs, statins, and anti-diabetic, all of these NSAIDs and antidepressants, antibiotic and things, all induce mitochondrial toxicity. So you have a nerve system, sure you do, but you also have a huge nociceptive system. This is larger nervous system, it's called like a secondary nervous system, but it's not. It's really more primary, it's a nerve, it's a conductive condition, nociceptive, which encodes, pleasant or harmful sort of sensation and things. So pain is subject more to interpretation, isn't signaling. And what whole brain functioning is there, where life is, you've got a harmoniousness where vibration is, you've got these epsilon lambda waves, which is promoting more longevity. And the longevity factor is more determined by your lifestyle and inner quiet and things, and not genetic, 70 to 80% at least. And so key practices where plant-based life food is, and where you're practicing a bit of yoga, and sufficient where sleep is, and you've got empty, you've emptied out your mind, you're more in eye awareness, you've got more otherwise avoidedness, where you've got a lot of dead sort of sound noise and all sorts of things going on where pollution was. And so your jing and your sexual hormone and the feeling that you have for a long life your creative, spontaneous intelligence. All this is maintained by hormone that, like, across life, is promoting more for her, for instance, ever more lubricatedness and arousalness. And for him, where elasticity and everything is in his, and her sensual satisfaction. And sort of where lubricatedness is for her, like the Bartholin glands. Of course, you've got cervical and vaginal tissue and things, and everything is supported more by the comfort of where health is. Otherwise, um, you know, she has ejaculative material, which is a lot more than what he has, um, and both have ejaculative material, of course. And her scanner gland is his prostate gland is similar to her scanner gland, and so for squirtedness, where all things are, you've got a sort of a bladder origin of fluid and things, which where testosterone and estrogen really is an influence. You've got a sensual function evermore. Otherwise, life food is really supporting what this is, because you've got stable hormone levels throughout your life. Otherwise, maybe you don't. Hormone and behaviour feedback loop is existing, isn't it? Which influence hormone production and influence behaviour. And what does whole brain functioning do for this? Like how relaxed is your shoulders? How relaxed is your tummy in life? And otherwise, shouldn't it be that you should be learning right now in this program a bit like what the stress triggers are and how ACTH, like adrenocorticotropic hormone release, um, isn't as much where pleasure activity is, and yet you've got more release of dopamine and things, you see. You've got a feedback, which is psychological states where the endocrine gland is and behavior and motivation reward, where behavior is more where it's tied to neuroendocrine regulation, like getting exercise, eating more light food, eating once a day more or less, and having more joy in your life. So it's like a mindset of aging. Otherwise, you've got this counterclock study, counterclockwise study, which was done by Ellen Langer in 1979, which had just come out, and it was interesting to be the sort of from a lot of things. I saw that I would bring whole brain functioning and life with nutrition ever more together, and put people through training and do exactly like what they said and or what they had seen. And they had showed improvement in cognition and physical function and everything. And so they developed a mindset and an environment of the past where they were younger, and so that it really influenced youthing and the life quality terrain and these things, you see, and stopped aging. It reversed it. Experimental trainings, of course, were experiential trainings, experiential based trainings where you've got whole brain functions and things that I used to do a lot of for many, many years, teaching people eye awareness and the use of experiential based learning. So Annie and I pioneered sort of groups and programs for this in the 80s onward. Sort of, it used rope course and having people walk across hot coals and things like this, and also group challenge. And so you would look at things that you could design and rewire behaviour and collapse any stuck state that could have fostered something other than a nice permanent, more positive change now, you see. So your outcome can have been improved, of course, better communication, more resource orientated, and a focus more on your long-term quality of life, you know. And so, these are the things which certain it is the most largest common denominator, of course, is one's inner quiet, and it's so incredible. Matter of fact, it's going to cause you to have more human growth hormone. It also is going to cause you to have more albumin, you see. And so, without all of that, something is not going to really go on much, is it? Yes. So, let me see. Are you there still, Lucy?
I just texted you
I think I'll just go with this now because the text that AI gives you has no active language or anything. It's so bad, actually. You've got to actually really
You're
do a
right.
lot of that actually yourself. Um, so now I just got back right to the front of everything here. Um, so uh, it's the epsilon brainwave, which we've been talking about, okay? It sits far below the usual rhythm of your waking mind. It's found more in states of suspended animation, you see, a very deep spiritual transformation. You've got these epsilon waves, and they are less than zero point 0.5 hertz. So brain waves below this are all classified as in a separate band called epsilon wave. And wholeness, where you are in integration, which whole brain function is about, um, is really your main theme where all this is, because brainwave, like the lambda brainwave, is really got this high frequency brain piggyback wave with it, you see. So epsilon nerve waves are these less than zero point 0.5 hertz, and it's brainwave that's below, classified like we're talking about. And otherwise, just a little bit above this, you've got lambda brainwaves as well, and they also carry these high frequency, you know, piggyback waves. So, and they're sort of very horizontal. The appearance of these waves, of course, really in right pericardial sort of symptoms and things leads to some sort of association where polymorphic sort of ventricular tachycardia might have been and things, because that's another reason why these waves could appear, but not the only reason why these waves appear. The direct measurement more where epsilon wave is challenged, you see, because they're very slow speed and low amplitude, and it really kind of made that more difficult to detect and hasn't been considered more where standard brainwave monitoring has been. But you've got epsilon brainwave, and it's the cause of you to be able to sit way more, have this seat and have a suspended animation where you've got more beautiful, deep spiritual trance, you've got more deepening, more profound inner stillness. Epsilon brainwave are these ultra slow, extremely low frequency brain waves, which generally are considered to be below like 1 second, which they sure are. So they're associated, of course, with trance-like state, which you could have a feeling of, and out-of-body sort of sensation and things. So imagine that an expanded awareness is where you're feeling more deeply timeless. It's a feeling of presence where a felt potential is of a peak in your own sense of spiritualness, and an other than conscious, beyond sort of typical insight like you might have. So you've got really sources where a range of zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.4 hertz and things, where brainwave states are associated with profound spiritual experience, of course, like we're talking about, deep trance states, and out of body sensation, and so that you've got ever more expanded awareness. It's a feeling of a timeless presence, and where you've got a state ever more ongoing, where peak spiritual insight is consciousness is beyond typical understanding. Are you there, Lukey?
Yeah.
So, mate, yeah. So you've got eye awareness, and you've got a permanent feeling of bliss coming about for this, and achievement of a beautiful pursuit of a changeless joy. There's this pure being, and it's uplifting where you are, and it's speaking what's lived and living what you're speaking. And it's very receptive where you are, and in your feeling and listening, and in your capacity to have transparency to see. So it's anatomically where you're able to track whole brain patterning and body part movement, and you're looking at a metaphor more deeper of the other than conscious experience that somebody's having, and you can start to have better capacity to be able to see this through like learning how to track patterns. So that a pattern which you track twice, and so you're looking at things you see. So it's universal self, which is your pristine state where your identity is. So your identity isn't a behaviour that you're talking about or anything else. It gives you the ability to talk about a lot of things because that's not your identity. Adult that could have still been an immature child could have only ever thought that their identity is every behaviour that is mentioned. It's like, oh, how bad is that? No, stick with actually just what's professional where you are. So you're eye aware and you're aware and you're without bias, you see. And so you've got this absolute self, which is more stellar space. And so you've got this omnipresence, and it's really you who is eye aware. You see, you've got this that's not your body and beyond, and who is this in this eye aware state, and is breathing through you. So there's two ways that you could see an epsilon wave we're talking about. It's a very flat wave carrying gamma, and you've got things which existing below 0.432 of a second sort of thing. So you've got lower than that, and it's really an idea of a formed emitted epsilon wave that you could be manifesting more. Where your insight is, you've got epsilon waves, you've got a physiological heart signal found also where the same name is, and it's the slowed time frame happening where those waves are too, and things where one epsilon is characteristic of a specific disease and the other sort of wave is more coming about from being more eye aware. It's so what we've got really is a 53,000 hours beyond all this work, what we're talking about. But you've got verbal and non-verbal patterns that allow us to live in the whole of yourself. That's whole brain functioning. You've got a deeper insight where you are, where you've got better logic. And now it's possible to be engaging even more whole brain patterning by using direction to go forward and have things within you. Otherwise, you're looking at what something you're using direction away from and outside of. You see, what's that for? Okay. So communication, where adjacent quanta is, you've got this eye awareness and perception where verbal and non-verbal patterns are, and you've got more of this in smart contracts. So a morphology where whole brain functioning training is you've got syntax and semantic structure, and non-verbals and verbal, which rule more governing syntax. You see, you've got vestibular associativeness or dissociation, and you've got disclosure. You've also got conduct where a logical rational continuum is, and a strict sense of syntax where lexical semantics and in integration. You see. You've got phonetics, which is sound, okay, and you've got physical properties. How did you make that sound through motor movements of your mouth? And it's got motor movement connected behind it. So phonologies all have a phonological condition there. Integration could be, but also ambiguities and things. Ambiguity and sound organised where something is of some rational continuum. So cognitive science more is where your intelligence is providing a modelling, and the brain is processing information more to neurobehavioral physiology. A whole brain functioning process is learnt where it's just naturally triggering whole brain functioning ever more for you. So it's overriding wherever that wasn't, because it's a large enough resource state that collapses all that stuck state. And so it's proposing a connection that you have, of course, between neurological processing and neuromemory and language and linguistics. You've got and functioning, which is everything else which is sustainable. And so these are core subjects in whole brain functioning. So behaviour is successful where people achieve similar results. You've got perception where the world is, based and subject to your own internal experience. And so what about that could be modified? The brightness, perhaps, of the middle image, or the volume that you're using, the manipulatedness of where detail is, where you've got submodalities, but how are you using your metamodality? That's the vestibular thing. And that's all the body movement words like forward, back, up, down. So you're included what's verbal and non-verbal and these cues. I'm bringing in non-verbal here because, like, gosh, most people just only think about verbal, but it's a real influence over behaviour and communication. So anchoring and triggering those emotional states and reframing and things is part of a work that's possible to learn more. And you've got brain imaging and clinical studies which show and give you theories about how brain and language and neurology is, you see. So it's not based on anything except what's most accurate, and it's not based on anything except what's current, not outdated. And so whole brain functioning and therapeutic claims and things that don't include what this is may not be really properly supportive of any evidence. So what whole brain functioning training really is subject to verbal and non-verbal linguistics, which give you a cue more in your own learnedness and how to read internal nerve structure behind pleasure and aversion. And this is what whole brain functioning studies, you see. So it's really a study of comprising what is manifesting to you, where your speech is, your conduct, and your disclosiveness, and its proper correct format, where utterance otherwise is social, of course, and you've got common and uncommon wisdom, availableness. You've got whole brain functioning, which is behavioural development, where your attention and understanding is ever more nerve processing, where synchronization is between the hemispheres. So you've got learning, which really you could be adapting ever more to be more natural. And you've got a keen sense of things, so like you're lengthening integration through your nose and you're tapping things. So language is also your sensory motor complex, like smelling, and particular, like what happens where that is damaged or impaired. The whole brain functioning really, in one sentence, you'd say that it's a common sense path of least resistance to communication. And so a machine could learn all of this, what this is, and the pattern behaviour around you and I to live more in a whole of ourselves. A JC Quanta is more a source code of where machine language can be, that can give you proper vending and things in understanding communication where other beloved are. So you really, instead of having high levels of homocysteine like we talked about, and getting all that lipoprotein there stuck into the arteries and whatever because of bad eating and whatever, and what is independent, where that all risk factor is as a multiplier, force multiplier. So it's a hardening of the arteries and all of that sort of thing, which really could be going on where that is. You've got an altering of all the internal wall of the blood vessel and homocysteine damage, radical and endothelial cells, which has altered protein structure. And so you've got homocysteine, like thialactone, which really is seen attaching more to lysine residue where protein is. So you're looking at a process of homocysteination, you see, which is disrupting the function of the structure of the key protein where collagen is elastin. Very vital in maintaining structural integrity where the blood vessels are and your connective tissue. So dead food sure does allow a lot of toxin in and no enzymatic activity much. No. It's all the activation of enzymes. So it's not breaking any high levels of homocysteine down, is it? No. And it's not inactivating any of that, all the crucial enzymes which, like lysyl oxidase, responsible for proper cross linkage and things where collagen and elastin is. So all of that could lead to disasters with weakening the and having less elastic blood vessel. So dead food's going to do that, you see. So nitric oxide is crucial. It's a molecule that's produced. It's going to cause your blood pressure to be relaxed more, and blood to flow, whereas homocysteine is going to do the opposite. It's going to cause no nitrous oxide production probable. So you've got nitrous oxide synthesis otherwise alongside what should be, also human growth hormone, but any of that's going on? No, it's not. You've got ADMA, this asymmetric dimethyl arginine, which is endogenous inhibitor of nitric oxide. You've got a lot of cancer tributyl going on. And every time you just a polarizer, it's not going to be good for you. You've got a lot of otherwise nitric oxide synthase, which all of that would have led to a decreased production of nitrous oxide. So overreactivity, very common, isn't it? People set off. Oh my God, how about into your relaxed state instead? So oxidative stress would have been otherwise, and it really reacts to inactivate a lot of the available nitrous oxide, which opens the blood vessels up. So otherwise, it's really reducing the life colloid availability of whatever contributed to endothelial dysfunction would have been otherwise, you see. So it's the imbalance of sticky mucus food and what have you, and it's the epigenetic contribution to all the cellular dysfunction, in particular like vascular and nerve tissue. So your thoracic outlet, certain, and syndromes that relate to this, and the compression of all your nerve and blood vessels, where shoulder and neck and things are, it's a potential cause of arteriosclerosis and hardening of the arteries. So mycotoxin, like we said, it shuts all that down, and circulation and starts to have been overridden. We've got intestinal flora not present like it should be, and excrement from this non-ecological life colloid that gets deposited in the external tissue. And so that doesn't respond well much to heat and cold, especially the cold. It kind of makes the blood vessel spasm, and that is the cause of Raynaud's syndrome. Okay, that's the underlying condition. It's the triggeredness of blood vessels in the fingers and toes and spasms and all of that. Mycotoxin compound produced by mold, fungus, and yeast. It really is an aching type of a menu. It's a damaging microcirculatedness and cause of oxidative stress and inflammation, where you're just chowing down a lot of that dead food. But life begets life, and death begets death. So while mycotoxin otherwise is the cause of your blood vessel spasm, and it doesn't open up except close down instead, microcirculation. And so oxidative damage goes on, doesn't it? And all the harm going on where your endothelial cells are. So nobody's going to say that doesn't contribute more to the formation of clotting and all this sort of thing. Nobody's going to say that vascular tone and function isn't normal like it's supposed to perform and produce. Who's talking about anything like this? But used to have vasodilation rather than vasoconstriction. So if you breathe through your nose all the way through your sleep, you're going to have vasodilation. You're going to be having more hob and pectin, you're going to have vasodilation. Otherwise, you're going to have vasoconstriction. There's substances where you've got disrupted tissue and blood pressure regulation and blood flow. See, Ricky? You've got dead food consumption and flesh causing all that massive leaky gut and all of that going into the bloodstream and having poor microcirculation. You've got the mycotoxin contamination like that FB1, which is progressive and showing very important risk factors for mediating neurotoxicity or neurodegenerative types of disease, and the very harmful effect of dead food. And it's diastatic yeast and things that rises, where that is, it tears tissue apart. And so mitochondrial toxin like cyanhydric acid and everything like it be cleared up with potassium rhodonase. But where's anybody getting any white gold today, you see? So otherwise, you've got nothing to transmutate cyanide, which potassium rhodonase does. You've got all sorts of cortisol having to be no longer there, of course, if you've got whole brain patterning, and blood flow. And so you're talking about brand new behavioral generators which could help you change the way that you are in your state of being. And so mycotoxins, where a cell mitochondria is, it's an asphyxant that interferes with normal use of oxygen in every organ. And so you're looking at the exposure to hydrogen cyanide and things, which truly is fatal. And lots of chemicals and things will all finally break down into simple forms like nitrous oxide, like cyanide. So the primary cause of death where anything is respiratory depression. It's really slow to where you are to suppress involuntary drives to breathe, and becomes even more slower, more shallow somewhat, you see. And it's compounds and stuff could have caused them to cease. So it's really a toxin that shuts down cellular respiration directly, and cyanide works differently. Of course, it interferes with chemical process in the mitochondria, where it can't use oxygen after that point. Opiates also shut everything down, and so what have you got after this, you see? So if you stop your own internal dialogue, which is eye awareness, and you stop negative aversive patterning and turning on and off and turning all that high cortisol and hypercortisolism, it's really a cause of various symptoms. And for female and male, we've really those all about emotion, cognitive sort of maturity more. So anxiety and irritability and depression and mood swings and things and all changes like that, and your concentration, and how about how you're sleeping, you see. So these all would have been increased risk for you to have a consequence of aversive patterns. And so once you get rid of that aversive patterning. So emotional, you might experience anxiety otherwise, and irritability and depression and things like that, you see. It all stems from chronic stress. So ensuring adequate microcirculation instead, you're using a whole brain functioning. You're bringing things in, like you're getting a bit of magnesium, like from blue manna or something. Orthophilic magnesium is critical. You're considering how products and things like that and readings could go on where you've got more adaptogen in the natural substance. You've got reishi mushroom and things. You've got rock rose, a whole range of things, you see, that are adaptive to stress, where balance is, and whole brain functioning patterns ever more alongside eye awareness is you really being more where perfect detachment is. So peace of mind, and you're not really doing anything where excitotoxins are, and it's like excessive glutamate would have been in a fresh and bean diet, otherwise dead food. And so you're ridding the serious toxin, and otherwise you not stopping any triggered aversive patterns and glutamates and all of that, where there's protein paratizers loaded where pea protein is. You've got the acquisition of fear memory instead. So certain questionable demonstratedness is everything is state specific, you see. So structural validity and context can show you how disruptedness is to where glutaminergic neurotransmitters are and how amygdala function is. And so in this work, you sort of major class of glutamate receptors, which are in looking at how they impair nerve conduction and how that could have been impaired and inhibited proper capacity for you to be able to dissociate and associate. And so it can have left more frozen like stress where fear conditioned is, and you don't think that a pea powder and things like that could do something like this. It's very high in glutamate. That's a new toxin. It's definite that you've got manifested increased pain and sensitivity and headache and general fatigue. You've got a lot more of that seen than you have before, than you do afterward. So it's demanding to look at, I see. You see, you've got to really know what's going on back at the ranch house where mood is and in your own stability. So things can mimic the effect of a natural hormone estrogens like xenoestrogens, which really damage and interfere with the body's hormonal function and overstimulating all of that and blocking the proper alteredness of hormonal signaling. So otherwise hair loss, accompanying with that usual loss of libido, we just were talking about excessive xenoestrogens. It all fits where you're starting to get male pattern baldness and alopecia, hair loss. So estrogen dominance, where high estrogens are, you've got levels of unopposedness of any other hormone like progesterone. And so binding to those receptors, you've got a preventiveness of normal hormone function from dead food consumption. And so it's the cause of DNA damage and leading to cell death and promotion of neoplasm. So plastics, like the biphenyls, the BPAs, the phthalates, and all these, don't tell me that that's not estrogenic, and the sunscreen, fragrance, and containing parabens, propylparaben, isopropylparaben, an endocrine disrupting ingredient. You're clearing away whatever's excessive and synthetic and no longer looking at those things like, otherwise, gosh, estrogenic. It's really cause of irregular ovulative cycle and amenorrhea and dysmenorrhea, where the period is, and a worsening of conditions which impact sort of reproductive health, which should really be cleared away. Ultra high processed sources of food and stuff all lead to a condition that totally disrupts hormonal balance and your body's overall estrogen level. And it's certain that new toxins like that from fermented pea protein, all glassified and cooked out, is estrogenic, like causing mycotoxin and things. Zearalenone or Zen is produced by mold and contaminated grain and cereal or process. Zen is sort of a known xenoestrogen, and it damages reproductive tissue and things. So honestly, like in brevity, you could really assist to stop all the fermentive statedness of where food preservatives, butylated hydroxyanisole, BHS, is identified where it's an estrogen. So healthy monosaturated fat is what you should be doing, where live food is vegetable and otherwise flesh fat you've got wrong. And so unhealthy processed fat contributes to inflammation, of course, and exacerbating hormonal issues. So egg and things the same. So while androgenics, which impact alopecia, which is male pattern baldness, primarily is driven by androgen hormone, dihydroestrone, DHT. Estrogens really influence condition and see interaction where androgens are. You've got proper hair growth cycle. You've got impactedness otherwise of this. You've got a disrupted balance where something could be estrogens inhibiting the production of androgens, including testosterone and DHT. And so you're looking at all of this otherwise and how that could have been converting testosterone and processing, reducing all of the amount and substrate that would be converted to DHT, testosterone. So you've got 5 alpha reductase enzymes, which could be just converting all of that, you see. So stress, where that would have been, is going to cause all of that, and that reactiveness of excess of stress and hormone and dead food. Don't tell me that's not going to stop that recycling of DHT like it should, but it doesn't. It reduces it, and it reduces its proper conversion also. So fatigue and adrenal exhaustion will impair functioning, you see, and these aromatase enzymes, which are where hair follicle converts testosterone to estradiol, a potent form of estrogen. And so, voila, somebody could have hair loss, you see. And so consuming dead food non-stop and having all of that heavy protein, carbs and fat combined and combos and eating 3 or 4 times a day, you're going to have high amounts of phytoestrogen and all the soy products and things also, you see. So dead food really and fat seriously is a bit of a culprit where all that's going on. and how you're going to have epsilon and lambda wave where all this is. It's an example of including isoflavones and lentil and legumes and all the lignin and flax and cereal grain and things and oils or, which aren't right. So if you're avoiding all of that, you're going to be able to no longer have a contributed elevated estrogen level, all right? So if you do live food instead of just all just cooked dead food, otherwise the tissue of the body's just going to pleomorph through an aggregation, fusion and differentiation into salmonella and E. coli and listeria and staphylococcus aureus and these things where the intestine is, and symptoms of fever otherwise then afterward, and nausea and vomiting and severe diarrhea. So live colloid that you avoid where flesh is and bean, it's for many reasons that it's excessive biogenic amines, and the histamine and all of those things aren't proper. Like you've got putrescine and carnitine. You've got high levels of amine and dead food, flesh and bean, and health challenges as a result, and allergic like reactions like skin and stomach and headache and physiological issues. You've got you've got that going on, and indigested food from the meal, fat, protein, and carbohydrates, which triggers somatostatin, slows all your nutrient and down and stops your stomach from emptying properly, doesn't let any pancreatic activity. So you're looking at dietary fats necessarily really not properly being broken down like it should be, otherwise, well, it should be, you see. Otherwise, it's going to end up as a fatty acid and a glycerol in the upper stomach. And so maybe you've never heard about any of this, you see. It's really how dead food could be having triggered somatostatin, and how, knowing what to do where that is, and understanding how micro and macronutrient more should be, and having a heavy meal containing that fat, carbohydrate, heavy protein stimulus triggers somatostatin to release wrongful, and now you're not going to really have had any human growth hormone afterward either. So it's really you looking at your blood. How come you haven't looked at your blood? It's like, especially after a dead food diet. Somatostatin is going to cause newly formed triglycerides, packed and packaged little particles called chylomicron to be just like a snow in your blood afterward, dancing around. And mixed dead food combo really is disastrous. It's just going to be the fat of a meal broken down, and the fat and the acids and the glycerols, and where you're going to get lipase from, and bile and things like this. You see, it's not going to protect you by doing things wrong where you are, by being not monophasic where you're eating. So it's the preservation and the rate of all exogenous, meaning outside what you're doing, carbohydrate and oxidation of that, and the unnatural glycogen status that follows a carbohydrate restricted conditioning. So it would have switched off the pancreas and evermore only had aerobic glycolysis and cell cytoplasm, and likely due to the maintenance of low glycogen to have no glucose, you've got an uptake where you've got a lack in where peripheral tissue can be. So increasing fat oxidation big time, and fat-laden tissue not broken down, coasting, radically, of course, oxidizing tissue, okay? So you're looking at all sorts of associated marked changes where skeletal gene expression is. You're looking at the linking of an aging process directly, and it's the mitochondria where the powerhouse is. Otherwise, you've got a slow loss of function. You've got a low energy where people could be falling asleep during the day and hardly any adenosine triphosphate from mitochondria. You've got far less effectiveness going on with age, leading to an accumulation of faulty mitochondria. See where cell function is. Why don't you have a better approach, a proper approach? Or you haven't had an approach at all. So the condition where somebody is including neurodegenerative disease and metabolic syndrome, and would you say death ever more generally is by consumption? It's really the lacked enzyme and immune challenges of everything that goes on where genetic mutation is inherited and spontaneous. You've got environmental toxins like drugs and pollution and excessive oxidative stress where reactive oxygen species is. And you've got stuff that doesn't really help proper, like drugs like statin and anti-diabetic and anti-epileptic, and you've got these antidepressants and certain antibiotics. You see, you've got what's surprising is nothing that's not a proper direct effect or should be, and tissue conduction. And so what's going on with your secondary nervous system is your nociceptive sedation. The proven links, of course, where resonance is in the activation of our nociceptors, coming back full circle to eye awareness and your lambda wave and epsilon. So you've got nerve force otherwise not properly picking up information like it should be, new information, and otherwise you've got the damaging stimuli that would have gone on to cause aversion, and so you've got this pleasure or aversion, haven't you? And your nociceptive neurological conditioning that's coded for the transmission that's giving you see, and what the response is going to be from that. How can these things be modified properly? So otherwise, that discomfort would have just been interpreted like as pain. And if you're more in a whole brain function state and life food, nutrition, how's this giving you good life? How's this impacting your lambda wave and giving a confluence of vibration which is harmonizing things? And so life food is really part of your lifestyle, and whole brain functioning is too. And this estimates like something 70 to 80% of the longevity that you're going to have relates to these things, which is your regular exercise, you're avoiding dead food, avoiding or dead sort of sound, like having more inner quiet and calm. So you've got regular exercise, you see. You've got otherwise maintaining sex hormone throughout your life and just having proper lubricatedness, where the production of everything is like we're talking about. And for both him and her, of course, where she has testosterone, as she gets older, clitoral size of it grows more, erectile capacity, and all of these sorts of things where hormone is, you see. So testosterone really plays a fairly important role, and otherwise there could be not ease of any erection or erective tissue. So it's normal that you've got a hormone in adult female that fluctuates in ovulation cycle from 20 to 400 picograms per milliliter. You've got life food diet, of course, all maintaining everything proper. Average testosterone levels for women really is around about 15 to 70 nanograms per deciliter. So you've got women significant sort of higher level of estrogen, a bit more than men, and a slight less level of testosterone and things where, but so important where these hormones you see, that testosterone influences her and him, where libido is and sensual feeling is, and his spontaneous creative intelligence. And so testosterone is involved even more where female and male proper functioning is, and where desire, of course, arousal and that sort of thing. So it's increased drive and arousal where women and men are, and testosterone otherwise as androgen really is hormone, and boosting our gene you have for life and increasing your motivation. Of course, in sexual activities, it could be as part of that expression maybe where you are. So it's really state-specific where behavior is creating a hormone rather than a hormone creating a behavior. And it's still aware of a more behavior and influencing ever more hormone creation through feedback mechanism. And so you've got adrenocorticotropic hormone release, which is stress otherwise, and the release of all of that, taking up all the material that would be used for other androgens. So you've got these feedback loops that's bidirectional and hormone that's affecting behavior. And where physiological state is, where behavior is, you've got this beautiful impacting your endocrine system, and how you're going to turn all of this around so you've got future longevity, and your reward and your motivation, and the neurotransmitter and hormone that contribute to your feeling of pleasure and motivation, where your pursuit is. Is this your sensory nerve bank where your hypothalamus is and information? Yes. Is this the feedback loop which processes and creates proper bidirectional links? Yes, it is. Is this how hormones circulate in the body? Yes. Is this the influencing of where your nervous system is, how that's modulated subsequent to emotion because you consume live food versus dead food? Oh. So imagining your younger self really does reverse everything. And I think we could wrap things up with this just a bit where we are, and we'll go on past this for a future show. But imagining your younger self reverses an older self, imagining a younger reverses his age clock. It was studied, of course, where the counterclock was. Study was done in 1979. Ellen Langer, as we began to talk about, and a similar imaging, really living and setting up a younger time and memory triggered a younger response. It's really what happened. So in that counterclockwise study, it showed the mindset influenced youthing, you see. And so everybody was asked to go for 1 week or more and live for 20 years beforehand, and they had important physiological and cognitive improvements. So the environment always, where you are, where outdoor training is, and the sort of thing which we used to use primarily in wilderness and other things, it always gives you really great capacity to have imitation and contemplation and experiential-based sort of initiatives. So developing and calibrating self-initiativeness and partnering skill in your long life and having aptitude where group dynamic is really what whole brain function training and personal development is about. And it's very much awareness and onward through the 80s. And Annie and myself, of course, pioneered a lot of training where Cloud, we used her Cloud 2 Children's training and developed this. And so it was taught ever more experiential based, like through ropes course and things, and the participants really gained great permanent sort of change. And so the environment that's setting is, and if you carefully control that, like what happened, these people all were just watching show and things like that from a time frame that where they were much younger. And that was just the way that they achieved this, but we achieved this by engaging you in adventure and play. So photos of people before and after, it's quite crazy how much what you're looking like before and after. You've got participants that walk across hot coals and did the high ropes course and used resource and high wired internal new behaviour response. You see more eye aware, and in the meantime you've got more whole brain functioning patterning. And whole brain functioning training springs up out of Cloud 2 Children's ongoing trainings around America at the time, participating in participants participating in a gained of a communication skill and accessing resource state to collapse in a stuck state and onward, outward lived meditation and more because of it. So you're really told about now how modelling is and how you're actively engaging in this or not, and how you could learn how to chain anchors together and have accessible resource to collapse stuck state to be able to create transformation. And so it's this sort of work which remains wrapped to you with a framework which is like a visiting frame wrapped around everything, which is, hi, how you doing? And everything else going on inside of that. So it's you really looking at the speech and reframing where prejudice is and having perceptual filter and timeline therapeutics that assist to help enhance all of this. You're really looking at a time where present tense is, and you and I be more flexible and playful, and being empty, and being in your compulsive, spontaneous creative intelligence more. And so this is where you and I have our greatest reflexive, youthful body. Okay? It's in your resourcefulness, yes, and what's been gained here by listening today to this program, that you could have changed the way you care about all of the things that get installed where you are into a future moment. Anyway, I hope you're having a really great day as you're listening to this. We've just had a bit of a program about all what you're imagining and what is real. The body perceives the same way, and how does whole brain functioning versus limited mind function, and how does light food versus dead food contribute more to you ever having more epsilon and lambda waves in your own life and having proper function. Anyway, love you, mate, and love you guys. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're listening to this, and catch